Hello, guys, and welcome back to another weekly edition of Burley Love in the District, where we're going to go over the NFL scores, something that we just started doing to try to change it up. We did start a little bit late, so we are starting on, I believe this was just week 4, yes. So we're starting in week 4, and we have our records up at the top, which from this week and what our predictions was. The ones in black and white were the ones we guessed, were the ones that we thought would lose. The ones with color, with the Raiders, was a little bit difficult because it looks black and white either way.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, everything's up there on the screen, so we'll do that, and then we'll go over our last week's predictions and then move over into next week's too, and we'll pull up that schedule. So starting out this week, we started with the Thursday night football, the Dolphins and Bengals, which I think the one reason the Bengals got screwed over in that game was because of Tua. I think Tua's been playing really well this season, and that's just...
I think that's what hurt the Dolphins. And, well, frankly, the fact that he was on the field is pretty ridiculous. If you saw what happened to him the game before, when he was stumbling around, that was clearly a concussion. That has nothing to do with the back.
Yeah.
If he was able to stay healthy, I think it could have been a more interesting game, but what are you going to do?
So, yeah, I think if he stayed healthy, that would have been an interesting game, and then the Bengals took over from there. The doctor who cleared Tua to play got booted, and he was fired. Rightfully so. I mean, when your quarterback can't even walk off the field straight, you should not be clearing him to play. Starting out in London, which I don't know how many fantasy leagues you're in, but in one of my leagues, I have Alvin Kamara, and since the London game starts at 9:30, I wasn't awake to see that he was out, and I woke up to getting 0 points from my running back too. So that was not ideal. And what made it even worse was, I think if I had started Miles Sanders, who I think I have on my bench in that league, I would have
that would have been good.
I think I would have went on to win that game. So yeah, I've Miles Sanders on my bench who had almost 30 points. So I would have won that game. I think I would have won that game had I started Miles Sanders, and if that game didn't start at 9:30. So they were in London. They started at 9:30. That came down to the wire too. That was a field goal.
That came down to a double doink.
That was only one doink. It just went off the crossbar and bounced back out.
I thought it hit the bottom one as well.
Oh, I thought it only hit the bottom.
It hit one of the side.
So I guess it was a double doink.
Bottom, it was a double doink.
Which I think the Vikings didn't look great in that game. Andy
but
Dalton, the Red Rifle, was slinging.
I mean, 20 for 28 for 236 yards. That's pretty good considering his main weapons weren't healthy.
Yeah, Michael Thomas wasn't healthy. Chris Olave had a big game. Next, the Dolphins Seahawks, which might have been the most interesting game of the week, which never thought.
Dolphins Seahawks.
Lions Seahawks, which again might have been the most interesting game of the week.
Yeah. Well,
that was so high scoring, no defense.
I didn't expect the Seahawks to drop 48 points. I would have expected it a little more to the Lions because they have good offense, but I did not expect that from the Seahawks.
Dude, the Lions just keep on getting handled every week. Like, the only week that they haven't scored north of 30 was last week against the Vikings. Other than that, they've scored north of 30 every week, and they can't get wins.
Yeah, they're 1-3, but if you look at their offensive numbers, you wouldn't have guessed that. But yeah, the Seahawks, Geno Smith was 23 for 30 with 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rashad Penny, 17 carries, 151 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Did you see DK Metcalf getting carted off just to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, he did a Paul Pierce.
He's like, yeah, I wouldn't have made it. That's kind of funny.
But that was a ridiculous game.
Next, the Jets and Steelers. Now, this was one you and I, if you guys watched last week, this was one that you and I were battling on because you thought the Steelers were better than they were. And I was like, dude, the Jets are coming on. They're coming on. Zach Wilson made his return.
I disagree with you on that point, but I just thought the Steelers should be so much better because their defense They're not. Kenny Pickett came in and laid an Aggie through 3 picks.
Kenny Pickett threw 3 picks, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns.
He still had 3 picks.
But Zach Wilson made his return, went 18 for 36, 252 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a receiving touchdown. They ran the Philly special and scored on that. So
yeah, I mean, not a terrible game, but not great. I mean, it could have been worse considering he just came back and it's just really good.
Yeah, because he didn't get any preseason work either. So going to the Giants-Bears game, they were one of the 2 big teams that had huge quarterback issues this week, with the loss of Daniel Jones, and then right after that, Tyrod Taylor took a big hit, went into concussion protocol, and they had Saquon playing quarterback for a little bit.
Yeah, but
somehow they pulled it out. They
had 9 pass attempts in the whole game.
They were running a lot of the Wildcat with Saquon at quarterback, because obviously you don't want your running back throwing the ball. So still not a surprise there. I expected them to win. I was looking at the power rankings earlier. The Giants are the lowest rated 3-1 team, and they're ranked 19.
I mean, maybe like rightfully so, but it's still crazy that a 3-1 team is ranked 19.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think who they played. Tennessee week 1. Week 2, who did they play? That's week 3.
Cowboys?
I want to say that's right. And I want to say they played Carolina in week 2. Week 3 they played the Cowboys.
Was the Monday night game.
Yeah, week 3 they played the Cowboys and lost. And then week 4. So yeah, they're 3-1, which is kind of surprising. But going to the Titans and Colts game, that was just a game of who was a bigger disappointment. That was one of the 2 games of who was a bigger disappointment. And this one, I thought for sure the Colts should win, but Jonathan Taylor went out a little bit with an ankle injury, so he wasn't feeling 100%.
But he still got 20 carries, but didn't really do.
Yeah, he didn't do anything.
20 carries,
and he fumbled.
Yards.
But I mean, the Titans got off to a hot start. The Titans went up. I want to say they were up by 20 at one point. So they got out to a hot start, and then the Colts just never got back into the game. Derrick Henry had a decent game, 22 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown with another 3 receptions for 33 yards. So Derrick Henry had a decent game. And Ryan Tannehill, he's not terrible. Like, he's an average quarterback. So
yeah.
Without
A.J. Brown.
Without A.J. Brown, they're struggling.
Can't expect much from him.
The Chargers and Texans game, this one was surprising. The Chargers were up big, and the Texans almost made a comeback. But
well, I kind of compare this to the Week 1 game against the Lions, where they got up big and then they kind of just coasted.
Yeah.
And maybe like the score shows.
Well, they got a touchdown.
Than it actually was.
They got a touchdown later in the game, and to make it look a little bit better. But they were up, I want to say, 24-0 at one point, and Texans came back, and the final score was 34-24. So Texans made it interesting. Browns and Falcons, this is another one where you and I were going back and forth, and this was a decent game. It came down to the last minute. Jacoby Brissett threw an interception at the last minute, and that's how that game ended out. But that was a good game overall. Marcus Mariota looked pretty good. He only threw
17 with 139 yards.
I thought for sure he had better passing, but I mean, overall their team didn't do terrible. It looks like they went through the rush mostly. Tyler Algier had 84 yards. C. Huntley had 56 yards and a touchdown. Cordero Patterson had 38 yards and a touchdown. Now, I'm wondering if Cordero Patterson got hurt because he scored that touchdown at the beginning and then went out.
He did. But the thing about the Falcons is they didn't pass a lot, but when they caught passes, they were for big yardage going on to the wide receiver numbers.
Zacchaeus, yeah.
Zacchaeus, 2 receptions for 55. Kyle Pitts, 1 reception, 25 yards. Parker Heath, 1 reception, 22 yards. Zach Allgeier, 1 reception, 20 yards. Drake London, 2 receptions, 17.
So,
So pretty high averages, and
yeah, they spread the ball around quite a bit.
yeah, the Browns, it just they had good yardage numbers, but I guess they couldn't really finish.
They
in the
couldn't
red
convert,
zone.
couldn't finish it
Yeah.
off. Yeah. Uh, one of I'm sure your favorite game, the Commanders Cowboys game, which we will go way deeper in than we will on here on the actual podcast. So if you guys want to listen to the podcast, it's on Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. But
That should
Cowboys
be
take
coming out
down,
later in the week.
yeah, Cowboys take down the Commanders 25-10. Just give us your brisk overview.
I told you.
Cooper
And
Cooper Rush Cooper Rush is the real deal, eh?
No, but realer than us apparently. But
He's 3-0.
yeah, one of the I'm pretty sure I saw a stat where he's like possibly the only Cowboys starter to do that, or at least one of them. But yeah, we couldn't get anything going. We prevented sacks, but our offensive line still played like crap. Carson Wentz didn't play good, but the position we're putting him in isn't exactly ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, we should have looked at that
And-
from a personnel standpoint.
Chase Roulier could be out for the rest of the season, so
Yeah, and Sam Cosmi is playing like crap. So is Trey Turner. Our depth at the offensive line is being tested, as well as I think the coaching, because I don't know who the offensive line coaches, but clearly something wrong. Yeah, our defense is.
I was rooting for the Commanders in that one. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, William Jackson deserves to be benched.
Obviously, I picked him to win, but
Yeah, I told you so. They wouldn't win, but Jahan Dotson had another great game. But
yeah,
he's gonna be out for a
that
week
was
or
a
two.
beautiful ball.
Yeah, that's the upside of Carson Wentz. If you give him enough time, those are the throws he makes. But that, we can't expect him to run this running
By
down
himself.
West Coast style offense with what he's given and who he is as a quarterback. So yeah, it's just a mess. And again, it's another game where we did so many things wrong at every single level of the organization. For example, Dan Schneider posed for a picture with Jerry Jones, and they posted it on their Instagram. Why would you do that? We're supposed to be rivals. We went from having the owner of the Cowboys back in the 70s, I believe, try to copyright Hail to the Redskins, which is possibly one of the most petty things you could do. We were a true rivalry. Dexter Manley in the 1982 NFC Championship, I believe it was, he said he wanted to put Danny White's lights out, and by God's grace, it happened. We went from a real rivalry to a one-sided beating.
I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think over the years, it's turned. I was actually just talking to one of my friends who's a Cowboys fan, and it's turned more from a Cowboys-Washington rivalry to the Cowboys-Eagles being bigger, because obviously a big part of the rivalry is who's winning. So when you have Washington and the Cowboys competing every year, that obviously makes it more interesting. Now that the Cowboys and the Eagles are both good and they're both competing, that makes that part of the rivalry a little bit more interesting. So
it used to be one of the biggest rivalries in the entirety of the NFL. Now it really isn't. I mean, it really started to die, I think, in the early 2000s.
it's like the Packers-Bears.
Yeah, there were some really good games in the early 2000s where Mark Brunell threw 2 touchdowns to Santana Moss to win it with 6 minutes left. They were down with 6 minutes left in the fourth or something like that. I mean, there's a few good games here and there, like in 2012 there were some good games. But overall, it's typically the Cowboys swinging the beating stick on us, and it's not a rivalry. Rivalries aren't one-sided.
Going to the Eagles side, in a very, very sloppy and poorly played game, is the Eagles taking down the Jaguars 29-21. Another game that we will go more in depth on the actual podcast, but just a little brisk overview from me. They started out sloppy and they threw a pick six, but overall they took over the game and they ended up dominating the Jaguars. So at the start it didn't look pretty, but by the end, once they started running the ball, Nick Sirianni might be the most, I don't want to say forgiving, but he might be the best quarter coach at switching his philosophy. I was just listening to a podcast earlier, and it was Jason Avant saying how no matter the weather, Andy Reid is running his first 15, which is the first 15 plays you choose before the game even starts, and you run that just to figure out how the game's going to run. He said no matter the weather, you're running that. Once Jalen Hurts threw that pick six, Nick Sirianni flipped it and went to the run, and Miles Sanders had a career day. We'll talk about that on the podcast, so if you want to hear more about that, check it out. But yeah, a 29-21 win over the Jaguars. Had me scared for a little bit in the beginning, but I think after this game, the Eagles look as close to the real deal as they might be able to through this part of the season.
You've shown your offense has multiple facets.
And the defense. Hassan Reddick has 3 strip sacks in the past two games. So
you limited the Jags offense to 11 completions.
But we will talk more about that coming up later this week in our actual podcast. Going to the Bills-Ravens game, 2 comeback wins in a row. Eagles came back from 14-0 over the Jaguars. Bills came back down from, I believe,
20-3.
I was going to say 20-3. I believe they were down 17. So this was a good game. I couldn't believe it when they came up to the end and they were tied. Kind of blew me away, but yeah, Bills' resiliency, and this is the second huge lead that the Ravens have blown. So I'm sure that's scary for the. That's scary for the Ravens defense.
Yeah, they laid an egg like mid-second quarter. Lamar Jackson ended the game with 2 picks, and then they didn't score at all in the second half. Just an overall pretty bad game for the Ravens. And yeah, I think there's some things to worry about.
You can't give Josh Allen, an elite quarterback in the league, the time of day to be able to make a comeback. Otherwise, that's going to happen to you. So that was that game there. Going into the afternoon games, Cardinals-Panthers game. Cardinals still without DeAndre Hopkins. Doesn't matter. They take down the Panthers with ease. Nothing really big to talk about there. Did you see J.J. Watt almost got... So he had... I don't know what happened, but his heart stopped beating on...
Yeah, I
on Wednesday. They got him back to life, and then on Thursday he's like, "Yeah, I'm playing on Sunday." Like that was whack. Talk about dedication.
I would go to a doctor because a healthy person, your heart just doesn't stop beating.
Yeah, so that
doesn't happen.
And he got emotional at the end. He has a kid on the way, so that's a that's especially that's scary, especially if a kid on the way.
Yeah, I think J.J. Watt may need to go to a doctor and possibly take a step back from the game. I know you love it, but he's had history of injuries, and your heart isn't meant to stop beating if you're healthy.
Exactly. So that which could play a role coming up next week against the Eagles. But going to the Broncos-Raiders game, the Raiders get their first one of the season.
Yeah, and they just ran all over the Broncos.
Yeah,
this was the Raiders' offense. Give the ball to Josh Jacobs and throw to Devontae Adams, and that's all you need.
Josh Jacobs had 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams, 9 receptions, 101 yards.
Averaging 11 yards a catch. Yeah,
Denver is underwhelming this season, which I think it's a mix of a new system, a new quarterback, a new coach, and I think they're going to catch on coming in later, but haven't quite gotten it.
But they just lost Javonte Williams for the season.
Yeah.
And you don't.
But they just picked up Latavius Murray.
Yeah, but you don't pay a quarterback $230 million to be kind of disappointing still at this point in the season. We're into the 5th week in the NFL. You can't always make this. Like, it should take about a month, I feel, to get into a rhythm. And there has to be a point where you have to cut off the excuses and say, okay, you should be playing better. And I feel it's at that point with the Broncos because they should have a great offense, and it's just been disappointing at this point in the season.
Going to the Patriots-Packers game, the other team that had a huge quarterback meltdown. Mac Jones goes down last week. They start with Brian Hoyer. He goes down this week from
Bailey
Zappi, who leads the FBS, which is D1 football. So you're talking the same. He's playing the same same type of players in air quotes there as, Alabama, Penn State. Obviously, he's playing lower competition because he went to Western Kentucky, but had almost 6,000 passing yards and 62 touchdowns last season before graduating and going into the NFL draft. So he comes into this game and he actually holds his own. They did focus the game to the run after he came out, but still went 10 for 15, 99 yards and a touchdown. So he didn't play terribly for his first outing. Got his first touchdown out of the way. First rookie quarterback to throw a touchdown this season. So
yeah, I think the Patriots need to be worried, or the Packers need to be worried, because you almost lost a game to a team who had their third string quarterback in. So that's not good.
I think they're starting to finally see the lack of receivers hurting them. Is what I think it is. They're like the Titans. They're a very one-dimensional offense. You don't have any number one receivers.
Yeah, and they're very inexperienced. It's a very inexperienced wide receiver core. Yes, you have Randall Cobb, but he's far past his prime. You cannot rely on him. So I think the loss of Devontae Adams is really showing.
Aaron Rodgers, who never throws picks in Lambeau, threw a pick six early in the game, which kind of kept it in close. So that Aaron Rodgers definitely struggling without his receiver, Devontae Adams. The Chiefs-Bucks game. Now, I wish I would have gotten to see more of this game because I heard it was insane. I saw the one play where Patrick Mahomes was running around, looked like he was gonna jump to the end zone, backs up and fade away toss to Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the back of the end zone. I wish I would have gotten to see more of that game, but yeah, the Chiefs take over the Buccaneers defense and make the Buccaneers defense look stupid.
Well, yeah, but both defenses played like crap this game, but the Chiefs offense outperformed the Bucs mainly because not only did they have the pass attack, but they were able to establish the run game, and the Buccaneers weren't.
Yeah, so in their run, Clyde Edwards-Helaire with 92 yards, Isaiah Pacheco with another 63 yards, so they did run pretty decently in this game. Bucs defense, who I thought was one of the better defenses in the league, giving up 41 points, very uncharacteristic of them. And the Monday night game, this game was not fun to watch for me. One, because I was playing Cooper Kupp in fantasy, and he had about 364 receptions for 10 yards, and the Rams lost too. So this was a double whammy for me this week.
I think it's time to start maybe worrying about the Rams because they should be playing better. Matthew Stafford is not really having a good year so far. I mean, Cam Akers is extremely disappointing.
I think their big reason that they're struggling is the line. I think that's their biggest thing right now.
Yeah, and Cooper Kupp is like the only really wide receiver getting quality receptions. We haven't really heard from Allen Robinson this season.
I think he has one touchdown, maybe two.
Yeah, that's not great considering what he's supposed to be or what he's been advertised as, and they just did not play that great.
On the season, Allen Robinson has 9 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown.
That's bad. That's very bad.
And he went 4 for 53 and a touchdown in week 1. Week 2, 2 receptions for 23 yards. Week 3, I'm sorry, I'm missing a game in there. So it was actually week 2 that he went 4 for 53 with the touchdown. Week 3 with 2 for 23, and week 4, 2 for 7. So yeah, Allen Robinson definitely not filling in the void that Odell did. So I'm wondering if they're going to try to sign him back once he gets healthy.
I don't know what they're going to do. Because the Rams, the 49ers offense, it's decent, but it hasn't really been anything that special. What I mean by that is they're not the type of team that's going to bust like 30 or 40 on you, and this game is evident.
Yes.
But the Rams, they just could not stop Deebo Samuel, and Jeffrey Wilson had a very good game. So I think the Rams need to address the line like a lot, and I don't know what's
Yeah,
wrong with them.
Stafford
I
got
don't know.
sacked 6 times yesterday.
Yeah, and you cannot expect to win a football game like that. So I think that's one of the problems with the offense, and then the defense. You should be able to scheme a little bit better, but
That will lead us into next week. So this week, I just pulled up the schedule for you guys. So starting out on Thursday Night Football, the Colts visit Denver, another underrated bowl. Now
the battle of the disappointing teams.
Now with the loss of Javonte Williams, Denver added Latavius Murray, who I think is a very, very solid running back, and I like Latavius Murray. You know, he's just kind of a player who never caught on and never really got his starting role. And I think with the way Melvin Gordon has been putting the ball on the carpet, it might not turn out this week, but next week or the week after, I think Latavius Murray is going to take over the lead role in Denver with Javonte Williams out. I like Denver in this game. Even if they only sprinkle in Latavius Murray in here and there, I still think I like Denver in this game, especially at Mile High. I like Denver.
Yeah, I still trust them a little bit more than the Colts. The Colts, I mean, Matt Ryan has kind of looked like a downgrade at this point in the season compared to
Carson
what
Wentz
Wentz was doing last season. But the Broncos really haven't looked all that impressive. I do think the Broncos will win, but this is a game where it's kind of uninteresting for me because both the teams have been quite disappointing at this point in the season.
Next, you got New York at Green Bay. This is
another London game.
Yes, this is another London game. You're right. This one, I think Green Bay should win easily. I mean, I don't think New York is really proved anything yet. Like I said, 19th ranked team in the power rankings. Now, power rankings are opinionated, but still, I mean, they tell a little bit of truth to them. So,
and with the Giants' quarterback situation, I think this should be an easy win for the Packers.
Yeah, I'm going with Green Bay here. Next, you got Detroit at New England.
I got Detroit.
I think Detroit will just blow New England's defense out of the water.
The Patriots have quarterback problems in the Lions. I mean, they scored 45 last week, and they've shown that they can consistently score, so I got the Lions.
Yeah, I think the Lions are a team where it's like you thought they were going to be bad. They look really good, and they're still bad. I don't think they should be 1-3. I think they could easily be 2-2, maybe even 3-1. They're just losing close games, but they definitely should win this game. Chargers at the Browns. The Chargers are kind of scaring me thus far.
I mean, they scored 34 last week. I think the win. I think, like I said before, I think the game last week is similar to your matchup with the Lions. I think they got to a very early lead. They grew complacent, and they were able to show late that they were able to put them to bed finally. But I think this is a game that the Chargers should win.
I think it's a game the Chargers should win. I'm going to take the Chargers, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns do win, because I think Jacoby Brissett is a decent quarterback.
He's shown he's decent.
And also, I mean, you look at any of the quarterbacks who come from behind Tom Brady, and they play well in other systems. Jimmy Garoppolo, yes, they run the ball mostly, but when you need him to, he delivers a solid pass or two. And Jacoby Brissett, he's a good backup quarterback when you need him to be. He's not a season-long guy, but when you need a quarterback because your quarterback is injured, he's a good guy to fill in the gap. So I do like Jacoby Brissett, and I wouldn't be surprised if Cleveland wins this, but I think the Chargers should win this. I really like the Chargers' defense, too. Next, you have the Texans at the Jags. I think the Jags, coming off of a tough loss this week, should dominate the Texans without a doubt.
I think the Jags are a somewhat decent team, and I just don't think the Texans are.
Yeah, I think that the Jags should dominate this game. And Jacksonville has the going into week 4, they had the second most time of possession, and so I think that's a huge reason that they're winning. They didn't do that this week. They only had 1/3 of the possessions in the game. The Eagles had 40 to their 20 minutes, so they got a little bit dominated in that game, but there is a little, I think this will be their comeback game. Next, the Falcons at the Bucks. I think this is where the Buccaneers defense bounces back. The Falcons don't really have a number one receiver. Kyle Pitts hasn't shown anything yet, so
he hasn't scored a touchdown.
He hasn't scored a touchdown, and he hasn't really gotten many yards to my knowledge.
No.
So,
and looking at last week, Marcus Mariota completed like 9 passes or something.
Yeah,
like
he had
that.
9 passes.
And the Bucs scored 31 points last week, so the Bucs should win this handily.
Yes. Next, you have Pittsburgh at Buffalo. And Kenny Pickett is starting. I don't know if that changes your pick, but Kenny Pickett is starting.
Yeah, it does. The Bills are going to win by a lot more still.
Yeah, I'm going with the Bills here too. I mean, the Bills they've shown resilience in their last game. I don't know what happened to them in that Dolphins game, but I still like the Bills here. Speaking of the Dolphins, Tua is doubtful to play in this game.
He's not going to start, and I think with all the surrounding crap around the Dolphins right now, I think they have some distractions. I think the Jets are going to pull an upset.
Wow, really? I think that the Miami defense has proven, maybe they're 100% for real, but they're good and they're not to be messed with. So I'm still going to take, even without Tua, I'm still going to take Miami this week against the Jets.
I think they're a better team, but it's one of those feelings. I think the Jets could pull off an upset. This is only
Zach Wilson's second game. He had no preseason, so I think that this is a good game for Miami to kind of bounce back, even without Tua. So I'm gonna go with Miami there, and that's actually our first difference in picks, is right there. So, next you have Chicago at Minnesota. I think this one should be an easy win for Minnesota in this game.
Yeah, the Bears, I just don't think are that great of a team. They struggled to score against the Giants last week, and they lost to a team that was running back at quarterback. So they knew what they were going to do. They were going to run the ball, but they still couldn't stop it. So this is a game the Vikings should win.
I'm going to go with the Vikings, too. I still think the Vikings they're definitely one of the more potent offenses in the league. Their offensive line is solid, nothing fancy. They're young, but they're solid. Then you obviously have Justin Jefferson, who had a bounce-back game this past week. You have Adam Thielen still. Irv Smith still has yet to break out, but he has a promising future ahead of him. So as long as Kirk Cousins keeps on doing what he does and just staying decent, he is the definition of mediocrity in the NFL right now. His career NFL record is 60-60-2. So he is the definition of mediocrity. But I think as long as he just keeps on playing where he does, he should be able to continue a winning ability in Minnesota. So I'm going to go with Minnesota here. Then after that, you got Tennessee at Washington, one of the games that we will talk more thoroughly about in the upcoming podcast at the end of the week. But what are you thinking about Washington in this one?
We're going to lose.
I was going to say the exact same thing. You don't have a run defense. Your linebackers are terrible. Daron Payne and John Allen are good up the middle.
Carrying our defense at this point.
Yes, they're good up the middle. And
looking at the Titans' pass rush, they got 3 sacks against a Colts offensive line, which I think is very good still. Yeah, it's not going to go great for us. And looking at our injuries, Dotson's going to be out for a week or two. We don't know about Brian Robinson, but
I think he's coming back.
It's possible. They're very optimistic.
He was cleared to play.
Yeah, our offensive line has got some injuries, so I don't think we're going to win.
Your corners are going to have a day off, though, because the Tennessee wide receivers are terrible.
Yeah, but again, on paper, this is a game we should win, but looking at history in the past 4 weeks of football, I don't think we are.
Going to Seattle at New Orleans. This one is a weird game. Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's going to be a good game, but only because both teams are in a weird state. Like, I feel like Seattle should be a bad team, but they played so well against Detroit.
48 last
They played well against Denver. Like, they're playing solidly. Geno Smith.
Saints have the ginger Kirk Cousins, and he's actually playing decent.
The Red Rifle. Come on.
I saw ginger Kirk Cousins as well.
But
they're just a quarterback.
If Michael Thomas comes back, I think New Orleans by a long shot. I'm going to go on I'm 99% sure he's going to be back this week because I think he was questionable to play this week. Alvin Kamara is another question, but even without him, they still have Mark Ingram. I think I'm taking New Orleans in this game over Seattle. In New Orleans, that's a loud place. Now, granted, Seattle is loud too, but in the Dome, you got the echoes and the weird ways that the voices bounce off the roof. So I'm going with New Orleans just because of their secondary. I like Marshawn Lattimore more than any of Marshawn Lattimore and DK are going to be a good matchup, but I like that more than
I like the Seahawks because they were really able to get the run game going last week, and I think that's going to be very key for them this week. So I think the Seahawks are going to win because I think they're starting to ride. I think they're riding high because they're beating a lot of expectations, and they're coming off a week where they scored 48 points. And yes, it was a close game, but that's got to be a confidence booster for any team.
You know who I think is going to have a field day in this game?
Who?
Cameron Jordan. The Seahawks offensive line, not great. Cameron Jordan, potential Hall of Famer. You do the math. Next, San Fran at Carolina. I think this is another really easy one.
San Fran.
San Fran should win this one. I mean, Debo is an absolute dog. But, Carolina has a decent secondary. They still have C.J. Henderson. He was a first-round pick. Dante Jackson, who I'm 99% sure was a first-round pick. I will double-check right now. But
I'm picking the 49ers because I trust the Panthers last week and they let me down.
You're just bitter from the Panthers?
Yeah, I'm bitter because the Cardinals won.
But, yeah, I think I'm 99% sure that Dante Jackson is a first-round pick. And then they also have, who's the guy they just drafted last season?
Who, the Panthers?
J.C. Horn. He's also a first-round pick. So they just have a monstrosity of first-round picks over there. So I think that they should be able to win this game. Or I think San Fran will still win this game, but the secondary will be an interesting thing to watch, the wide receivers versus the secondary. Philadelphia at Arizona.
I think this could be an interesting and decent game, but I think you should ultimately win because I don't entirely trust the Cardinals' defense. And looking at how their offense matches up with your defense, they do have Ertz, they have Marquise Brown, and they have James Conner. But in terms of your defensive weapons, I think your ability to rush the quarterback effectively with 4 people is going to help significantly. And your secondary is obviously playing good. You limited the Jags to 11 completions, and they were coming off some pretty hot games, so I have the Eagles winning this.
I think the Eagles should win this too. Hassan Reddick has been having insane games lately, coming back home, really enjoying his time here. Their wide receivers, Marquise Brown as their number 1, just doesn't seem great to me. So I really like our secondary matchup against their wide receivers. And then I also like our wide receiver matchup against their secondary. You're now going to a place where you can throw the ball, so Jalen Hurts can go back to his dual threat ability instead of them only focusing on the run. And I'm thinking that maybe their offense opens up a second part of this offense that they weren't using before and try to run the ball more, being that they see Miles Sanders can handle the load and that they can,
offensive line,
it works.
Yeah, to do this.
I'll go more in depth with this, but they were without their starting left tackle last week, and still you couldn't tell the difference on 99% of the plays that they didn't have their left tackle. So that's, I think, a big piece of it. Next, you have Dallas at the Rams. I think this is the end of the reign of Cooper Rush.
I do too.
I want it to be the end of the reign of Cooper Rush.
Well, yeah, I do too. It was a little bit. It was looking like Dak could come back, but it seems like he's not able to grip the ball well enough, so he's not coming back yet. And I think the Rams are looking for a win to get back because I think they've been kind of embarrassed. They've been called into question these past few weeks because a Super Bowl defending champion should not be scoring only 9 points. If you're looking at the roster, just by looking at the roster, they should be the best team in the NFC East, but they're not playing like that. So I think this is a game they're going to look to get back a little bit of their mojo.
Next, you have Cincy at Baltimore. I think this is going to be an interesting game.
I do too. I have the Bengals winning because I think they're starting to gain confidence and gain traction. I think they got off to a very difficult start, but they showed last week that their offense is starting to click more. And the Ravens' defense,
has been struggling. Two 17-point plus leads blown. That's being generous because the one that they blew to the Dolphins was like a 28-point lead. So
yeah, I think Lamar threw 2 picks last week, and I think his lack of weapons is really starting to show. So yeah, I have the Bengals winning it because I think they're really starting to find themselves again.
I never count out Joe Shiesty. And
yeah, it's a question: who should I start at quarterback in fantasy, though?
That is the Sunday night football matchup and the Monday night football matchup. Las Vegas at Kansas City. I think this one's a pretty simple one.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun offensive game to watch because I think both teams' defenses are a little questionable. But when it comes down to it, I trust the Chiefs' offense to outscore the Raiders' offense.
I agree 100% with you. What scares me is I agree a lot with you this week. Yeah, I think we have 2 different ones. Now, since this is a new segment, you guys might, maybe some of you guys are new to this whole entire thing. We do a lot of guessing on our podcast too, where we guess, the Eagles and Washington game each week. And with that, Jacob has struggled quite a bit in playoffs for different sports.
Yeah,
and
in hockey one year, I'm pretty sure I had 1 or 2 teams that
made it. Only one team made it only one or two.
1 or 2 teams right, and then I'm pretty sure they lost.
So anytime that we guess and I have similar guesses, that scares me and I don't like it.
If you're a betting person, bet the exact opposite of what I predict.
Pretty much. So I might go in after this and just change all my picks to the opposite teams, but
yeah, because looking at my record, it kind of shows.
Yeah, so that is going to end off this week's guesses though. So last week I ended off 12-4. I know in the top it said that I was 12-3. I counted before Monday Night Football, so I ended off 12-4. Jacob ended off 7-9. So that's the start of it. That's our week 5 guesses.
Record,
yeah. So after this one will be coming out on about Wednesday or Thursday, and then our regular podcast will come out on Friday or Saturday. And so if you guys want to, send in questions, comments, all that stuff, all of our socials there are down there at the bottom of the screen. Instagram and TikTok at BLNTheDC. Our email at blnthedc@gmail.com. So go ahead and send us questions or comments on there that we do on our podcast. Check out our podcast at Apple and Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. And also go check out Baumburger. Got the merch on today, so go check them out. Food truck in Loudoun County. So with that, we are going to end it off there, and we will see you guys next week.
See you later.